We have begun the recording of the meeting.
Okay, I have 4:30, so I'll call the meeting of Committee of the Whole to order. And before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the District of Tofino operates within the territory of the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. And I'd like to notify attendees that the meeting is being video recorded and will be published on the District of Tofino YouTube channel. Now I look to committee for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved, seconded. Any additions, deletions, or changes? Okay, all in favor of adoption? Motion is carried. And then we have the minutes of the Committee of the Whole of November 2nd for adoption. Moved and seconded. Any discussions, errors, or omissions? All in favor? Motion is carried. And did we have anyone signed up for public comment on the agenda items, Elise?
No, no one has signed up.
Okay. We'll move into our delegations then. And this is item 5.1. We have a delegation from Bob Hansen, Pacific Rim Community Coordinator for WildSafeBC, regarding the 2020 program activities overview and winter 2021 January to February program extension. Bob.
Bob, I've just promoted you to be a panelist, so you can turn on your screen and share your presentation at any point. And once you start, you'll have 10 minutes.
Welcome, Bob.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors, for this opportunity to present a season overview and to seek collaboration with the district for 2021. My name is Bob Hansen, and I am, for third year, the WildSafeBC Community Coordinator for the Pacific Rim region. This presentation, I will, I don't know if you can you see that? Am I sharing my screen there?
No, I'm not getting it anyways. Does anyone have it? Maybe try again, Bob.
Okay. I am not sure how to address that. Is that something that has to be done on your end in terms of allowing me to share the screen?
Bob, if you look at the controls at the bottom of your screen, you should see an icon that says share screen with a green arrow. And if you're unable to do it, just let me know. And I have a copy of your presentation, which I could share from my end, but then you'll just have to let me know when to advance the slide.
Okay. All right, there. Share. Okay.
Looks like it's working now, Bob.
Okay. All right then. Yeah, so this presentation will provide an overview of the ways the 2020 program worked to keep wildlife wild and our communities safe. The primary program goal is to reduce and prevent conflict with wildlife in the short, medium, and long term, to coexist without conflict. Human-wildlife conflicts exact real costs for all First Nations communities, the district, residents, visitors, businesses, and ultimately the wildlife. Here's a snapshot of the 2020 WildSafeBC season. The program area covers Clayoquot Sound to Ucluelet and has run this year from April to December, thanks to support from 3 levels of government, 3 local businesses, and 1 NGO. Adaptations were made to deliver a busy program in these COVID-19 times. Booth days were reduced, but with the help of district staff, we still had a successful BC Goes Wild weekend, where we had over 100 socially distant interactions with residents and visitors. A new innovation was a virtual scavenger hunt with posters posted up around the community where people scanned QR codes and were linked immediately to locally made engaging educational videos, like for the wetland stewards or for Wild About Wolves with New Chalmouth elder perspectives, and the Tofino Community Food Initiative talking about food sustainability and protecting gardens, fruit trees, and chickens with electric fencing. Social media is an important tool for the program and as a means of informing residents and visitors. Thanks also to sharing of posts, blogs, and shoutouts from partners such as the District, Tourism Tofino, the CBT, and First Nations. The reach of the program this year was greatly increased. Weekly wildlife activity updates are very popular, and current wildlife activities presented along with relevant coexistence information. I could give you a very quick overview of human-wildlife interactions for the entire season. Human-bear conflicts were down significantly this year, from 13 destructions in 2019 to 2 this year. Sadly, 9 bears died in collisions with vehicles. Wolf and cougar activity levels were similar to last year. There was an altercation between a dog and a wolf in the spring, and there was an interaction between a person with a dog near the info center in November. This post was sparked by that interaction, and this post had a reach of 7,000. In terms of, this post was one of 44 posts for the season that had a reach of 41,000, and currently likes are at 663 for the page and followers are 930, both of which represent significant increases from last year. In terms of being out and about in the community, I teamed up with my colleague Marianne Paquette, who is running the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nations WildSafeBC program, and we delivered a WildSafe Ranger afternoon for the Tofino Parks and Rec Adventure Camp. I also was out and about in the community doing activities like surveying for garbage cans put out the night before, as mentioned in this article. So there were bin tag surveys, there was profiling of the program and its messages in the Westerly News, on Tough City Radio and CTV. I gave presentations to 8 different groups via Zoom or in person, and also participated in various local initiatives such as the Sac-Sin-Hay Teachmas Network, the Tofino Mudflats Wildlife Management Area Working Group, and Wild About Wolves, and the Indigenous-led West Coast Stewardship Corridor Initiative. I also gave training courses, so this was for a group of kayak guides on wildlife safety and awareness. And I also partnered with a number of residents and businesses through the ACRD subsidy funding program. So I was able to cover 50% of the cost of 9 electric fencing installations, 2 for resorts, 5 for chicken owners, 1 for a garden, and 1 for a family that have goats. Another training type of training course I provided was safe handling and use of bear spray, and this picture was from a session with district staff. And I also recently gave the same training for West Coast lighthouse keepers. Another training service is in how to implement the Bear Campsite program for campground operators. And I'll speak a bit more about this in a bit here. So these are some of the highlights, but there are additional details in the season end report. So this brings the presentation to the end of the season for 2020. What I'd like to focus on now for the last portion here is to highlight 3 initiatives for January, February 2021. For the first time, there will be a winter season for the Pacific Rim program. This creates the opportunity to work with partners on initiatives that are difficult to move forward in the busy season. And here are some ideas on ways to prepare for spring 2021. I hope to partner with the district and others. So ensuring garbage is not accessible to wildlife will always be one of the most critical means of preventing human-wildlife conflicts. Phase 3 of the COVID-19 situation highlighted many challenges and some surprises in terms of human behaviors, sparking the Show Your Love for the West Coast campaign. Securing garbage from wildlife took on an additional twist as this region and many others in BC saw their waste management infrastructure and operations overwhelmed. It was surprising and disappointing to see the litter and garbage left on the ground or stacked on bins. The question for this winter is, how can we prepare to head this off before the 2021 busy season? I would like to brainstorm and take preventative actions and proactively communicate with visitors before they come to the West Coast. Another initiative for this winter is the WildSafeBC Business Pledge Initiative. This is a new initiative to support and recognize businesses that are setting good examples on how to coexist with wildlife. Profiling local businesses is another way to demonstrate Tofino's commitment to coexistence and stewardship. And lastly, the Bear Campsite program has been launched as a province-wide initiative. And the provincial coordinator and myself developed this year a comprehensive toolkit to support campground operators with any number of resources, including staff training and visitor education materials. The Tla-o-qui-aht Campground has had this program running for 3 years and has been recognized and has been profiled across the province as an example of how to effectively implement this program. So I'd like to thank you very much for being a funder of the WildSafeBC program, and thank to all the other funders and in-kind supporters. And I'd like to thank Ocean Outfitters, Wiccan, Hotel Z, the CBT, and the COVID Emergency Support Fund for making the first winter program a reality.
Thank you, Bob. I guess we'll open up for questions from committee. Just off the top, though, I'd like to ask you, could you sort of review with us what the district offered last year, and maybe more specific?
The district provided, I believe it was 2,300 in funding. And in the 2 years prior to that, the support was in kind. And this year, it was the first year of financial support. And
also, what sort of resources and staff collaboration did we provide?
The adventure camp was a great collaboration, as was the BC Goes Wild event. So finding a way to meet the COVID-19 precautions and still have a public event. Cindy Hutchinson and staff really made that possible. So that was a great help.
Okay, thank you. I'll now turn it over to committee for questions or comments. Councillor Steer.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Thanks, Bob. I was fortunate enough at the ACRD to have the presentation, and I just wanted to thank Bob once again for the amount of work that goes into this program. As one of those chicken owners that benefited from the electric fence, I appreciated the support. And I just wanted to also mention the larger regional outreach that you've been this year were able to do with First Nation communities and the extra staff that you had there. And once again, just to thank you for that relationship, the ongoing relationship with the District of Tofino, the community, as well as many of the businesses. We all benefit from it, and keep on going.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor McMaster, then Councillor Law.
Hi, Bob. I just wondered, do you guys get involved in the highway? You know, we still keep on reading about how many animals get killed by vehicles driving from here to Port Alberni.
Mm-hmm. Yes. We partnered with Central West Coast, those large barren area signs that are around the Kennedy Lake construction zone. So we started out with smaller signs last year and larger signs this year. And there are signs about to go up on the road out to Area C, Atatsu and Port Albion area, where several of the collisions took place. And that's partnership with the Tla-o-qui-aht First Nation. And there'll be safety signage going up on that road.
Okay, Councillor Law.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. I just want to say thanks, Bob. I do follow you quite closely, and I know we've spoken many times, and I just really appreciate all the work you've done on these projects and up and down the coast as well, and all the input you have into our community and all the communities. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. Any other questions from committee? I just have one question for staff. In terms of the request for continued collaboration, is there a motion needed from committee? Do we have to express an interest in continued collaboration and or funding?
Your Worship, I think that would be worthwhile for committee to do that. And if I may suggest, the funding request, perhaps that could be referred to our budget process. Council's next budget meeting will be next month, and we can then have a conversation about the request.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chalmers?
I'd be happy to make a motion to refer the funding request to the next budgetary meeting.
Okay, is there a second? Second, Councillor McMaster. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, all in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Bob. And it was great reading your report as well. So
Thank you.
We look forward to continued work with you.
Awesome. Take care.
Thank you. Bye now. Okay. Moving on in the agenda. We have no correspondence today. And item 7.1, District of Tofino logo and brand refresh. And we have a report from corporate services and a recommendation before us in that report. I'll turn it over to you, Elise.
Through the chair, thank you. committee. I'm here tonight, but really as a supporting role to two great consultants that I've just promoted to panelists on your screen. We've got Therese Mickelson and Sarah Teliunas with us this evening. So I'll just provide a brief introduction to the report, and then I'm going to pass it over to Therese and Sarah to introduce the refreshed logo options and provide a little bit more context to the choices before the committee tonight. So the purpose of the report is to provide context and background for the presentation of two options for a refreshed logo that have been simplified and modernized from the existing logo design. And staff is seeking the committee's feedback on a preferred refreshed logo option so that the project can move forward with the creation of brand guidelines and template development. If the committee has any questions for staff, I'm absolutely here to answer those about the process that we've gone through, but at this point I might stop speaking and ask Sarah and Therese to share their screen and their presentation to council for a bit of fun, I think.
Thank you, Elise. All right, just give me a second while I go through the various clicks to share the screen.
I'll just say welcome from the committee at this point.
Thank you. We far wish to be there with you. This is a nice solution as far as the technology goes, but Sarah and I always love to visit Tofino. So a little bit sad that we can't be there to present in person, but it is a pleasure to connect with all of you on this. So I would like to say that what I think would work really well is if we could go through our full presentation that Sarah and I are going to share. To introduce myself a little bit, I've worked with the District of Tofino for several years now, and one of the things I worked on with Sarah was to develop the communication strategy for the district that was finalized last year. And then as part of that, it's an added bit here is that Sarah herself is also a bit of a huge fan of Tofino. So she herself is very embedded in your community without actually living in your community. So it's great to have her on the project. She's the creative director for it, and I'm the communication specialist on this. So what I did when we worked together on the communication strategy is we did what we call an audit of your communications and an audit of the design. And what we found when we did that was we noticed there was some technical challenges with the logo. And so as an example, we're going to run through some of the things that we found when we looked at various materials, and that was including everything from printed materials as well as your online presence like your website and your social media platforms, outdoor signage. We looked at a broad range of things to get a sense of how does the district currently present itself in the community. And what we found was that the technical challenges themselves were to some degree limiting your ability to establish what we call your brand and your presence so that you're recognizable, particularly in a community like Tofino where there's a lot of different brands out there all saying Tofino, and there's that kind of a worldwide audience that you have. So some of the technical challenges, and by technical I mean it literally because of the design or lack of standards, it inhibits your ability to get consistency and a brand out there. We noticed, for example, that the logo is not scalable. So what we mean by that is it can't go really small or really big. And it's funny because just on that last slide that we just saw of the presentation, I don't know how many of you noticed, but all the logos were up there, and the District of Tofino's logo, the font of the words was tiny. Compared to everybody else's, the name of your community didn't show up very well because the font is so small. So I thought it was interesting because there it was presented against all these other logos that relate to your community, and yours, while the graphic is really nice and clear and recognizable, the words District of Tofino were not. So not scalable is a problem. The other thing is that we noticed that the logo graphic is very recognizable, which is wonderful, but it's also a bit dated. And by dated, there's a number of factors that we found there. Part of it is just the amount of detail, like the number of lines and stuff like that. The fact that it's kind of a blend of colors as opposed to like distinct Pantone colors. It's a number of different things that make it difficult when we're talking about graphic design to repurpose and use the logo, as well as things like colors and fonts that we're going to talk about later. So it's just a little bit dated, but very recognizable, which is important. we also noticed that there was limited brand consistency. And by that, I mean, when I looked, at a spread of different materials in front of me, and when Sarah reviewed them, what we noticed is that, if you looked from one to the next, there was no consistency in what they looked like. And you need consistency. You need things to look the same in terms of color, font, and graphics in order for people to start recognizing them easily, that, at a glance, you look and that's the District of Tofino. So that there was limited consistency. And part of the reason that we found when we looked into it is that there wasn't any logo standards or brand guidelines. So fair enough, people are all just creating their own materials, and they don't have anything to go by to see what should they be using, what font should they be using, how should they select their photos, what graphic elements work. All of those things, there's nothing recorded to guide them. So that's one of the challenges. And then the other one we noticed is there's no logo security measures. So what does that mean? It's kind of like identity theft. How easy is it for people to grab your logo and repurpose and use it on things to make them look like they're you, the District of Tofino? So, so there's measures that you can put in place around the design and the standards that can help reinforce that kind of security so that it's not so easy for someone to just grab it. So as an example, if you look at the words on your logo in front of you there, District of Tofino is actually just done in a font called Gothic, which is a generic font that anyone can grab. It's a free font that they can use. So, if somebody wants to, they can pretty easily create your logo and then create their own materials. And so when I was with the city of Coquitlam, we had situations like that, and it's even more common online now, where people try to grab the logo and use it to misrepresent, themselves as representing the district. So all of these factors together were part of the things that we saw when we did that brand refresh, when we did the brand audit. But what we then did when we talked to staff is said, what can we do to just make some changes where we call it a refresh and not a new logo? Because as we said, you've got a very recognizable logo right now, and we want to build on that while looking at how can we address some of these technical challenges that you've got. So what we looked at was, we want to set some goals. And one of those goals was to simplify and modernize the existing logo. And we use the word modernize, not in terms of changing the personality of the Tofino, but actually just in terms of creating a logo that works online. So much communication right now is digital. You look at your social media, your websites, that kind of video, all that kind of thing. And so when we say modernize in that context, it's also looking at how do we have this logo so it's not just reflecting Tofino as it is today, but also is something that can be used in multiple platforms effectively. So to do that, we need to address some technical limitations, as we've talked about, and refresh the brand to actually reflect the community and the organization. And so, we talked a little bit about personality, talking about personality of things and how do things work in different formats. Sorry, got problems here. As well as how do we take the brand that you told us about. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the survey that we did in order to get from staff and council, what do you see as the personality and the image that you want to communicate to people when they look at your organization's communication materials? So we also wanted to define what those brand elements would be. So the goal would be to look at developing a typeface, primary and secondary color palettes. So what are the colors that you use that would reflect your community and your materials? When you look at the graphic elements, like how do you choose and select graphic elements, and photographic style. And all of those things work together to develop materials that when people look at them, they'll feel like they know what those are. When you look at different really well-known brands like Coca-Cola, there's certain elements like that, the Coca-Cola swoosh, that you look at those and you know that's Coca-Cola. So those kinds of things are also what we want to look at. And then we want to establish graphic standards and a logo usage guide. The logo usage guide is part of the security measure as well. It identifies who can use your logo and when, and what do they have to do when they use their logo to make sure it's set up properly. And then the other thing we want to do is we like to work with small communities to develop some templates so that we're not asking staff to start from scratch. In fact, they work within a template. It gets a good chunk of the design work done for them. And at the same time, it means that you have a very consistent approach to how your materials are being produced. And then finally, we would look at how do we incorporate security measures into the logo and the brand guidelines. So those were the refreshed goals that we set for ourselves. And again, this is all around addressing the technical challenges that we found during the design audit. So what we want to run through with you first is we want to go through and say what are some of the solutions that we looked at, so that you understand here's the challenges, here's the design solutions that we're using in the concepts that we're going to present to you tonight, so that starting from there you'll understand why are we doing some of the things we've done with the design. And then we're going to run through with you to go through what did we hear back from you around what you see as the brand for Tofino, both the organization and the community where you live. And then Sarah's going to present to you the concepts. So we wanted to set it up so that you'd understand from the get-go, here's what we're trying to address. Here's who you want, the personality and the image that you want to convey. And then here's the concepts. And you'll hear me say this a couple of times because it is really important at all times to keep top of mind both the science almost of a brand, as well as the personality and the image you want to convey, because it's really easy to get caught up in the personal likes and dislikes, right? It's like, well, I'm not a really big fan of that color, or I don't like that font. I don't think that's something that I like. Whereas really the funnel we're looking through is what best represents Tofino. And here's what we've said we want Tofino to say through its design and its logo, and which of these options does that best. So if you could kind of always keep that in mind as we go through. So what I'm going to ask is for Sarah to take on the next couple of slides, because she is the design expert, so that she can explain to you from that perspective of the technical challenges. We're going to go through them one by one, and Sarah's going to explain how the logo refresh is looking at solutions to some of those challenges. So Sarah, do you want to go?
Yeah, so as Therese mentioned, through the audit, we encountered some needs and set goals to address those needs. So I'll go into detail sort of around the current problems, and then the solutions that will sort of address the outcomes that we want to achieve. So as Therese mentioned, and again, we've got a sample here on the right, the current logo sort of faces some scalability issues. It's quite complex in terms of the number of elements within the symbol or crest portion, and then the size of the typography and the logotype. It doesn't really work when we start to shrink it down to very small sizes. And so what we're hoping to do through the concepts that we've put together are to address these issues and create something that will work both large and small, and both when you need it to work vertically in sort of a stacked orientation as well as a horizontal orientation, which you don't have at all right now. And then furthermore, the ability to completely knock off your crest when you're in a situation where you don't have space or it needs to be used quite small. And so social media is a good example of that you see here. You can't really see the crest. It doesn't look like much of anything. So this would be an instance where it would be helpful to just completely get rid of the crest and just use sort of iconic typography that would be easily legible, that says District of Tofino, but still feels like a logo.
And one of the things I'd add to that is not only do we not have a horizontal version that we can use, we also don't have something that's called a reverse version, where you can put the logo on a dark color where it's like white on a color. So kind of like this one here, you can see this part of it is white on. We don't really have that capability here. It's not designed yet with what you have available right now. Okay, moving to the next slide.
Yeah, and so we do feel that the current logo is recognizable and it has history that we can build upon, but it does feel quite dated. So both brand concepts that we're going to show you maintain sort of the viewpoint that you're looking at in the current crest. So the water, the trees, the islands, and the sky. But we've tried to create sort of more foreground and background and perspective with the elements. We also stuck with the current elements to try and keep sort of the fundamental structure in place so that it feels like a refresh and not like we're entirely rebranding the district. We also felt that this actual viewpoint is important because it's emphasizing the community. Since you're wherever the sort of logo is drawn from, it's as though you're standing in the community looking out at Lone Cone and Catface. It's not as though you're looking at a beach or from the park reserve, which kind of has a little bit less to do with the community itself. And so we've kind of also tried to look at the number of elements, so the number of lines in the sky, for example, to kind of reduce that and create something that feels a little bit more modern. And we've also tried to address the islands themselves, because right now they kind of just look like a couple of lumps and there's no detail in them, whereas the rest of the logo has detail. So it's sort of a little bit of an imbalance there. And then finally, we wanted to avoid creating anything that's too trendy to ensure that it will be timeless and you can implement it for years to come. So obviously, for example, your current logo has been in use for a very long time. So that's what we're hoping to sort of achieve for you moving forward as well. So currently, in terms of the overall brand, there's little consistency when you look at sort of different documents and social media applications, the website. Nothing's feeling very consistent because really currently the only framework that you have in place for your brand is a logo. There's no customized color palette, there's no consistent typography. And the lack of elements that you have to draw from is really limiting sort of the ease and consistency that you have when developing visual communications for your brand, because there's not really any sort of benchmark or gold standard in place for what the actual overall picture is, other than just a logo. And so our solution, as part of what Teresa's already mentioned, we conducted a survey with staff there at the District of Tofino to kind of help us set some key themes that will drive brand development. And Therese will cover those next. But what we've tried to do with the brand concepts that we'll present to you is we've tried to sort of consider the feedback we received while highlighting sort of certain key themes more than others with the two concepts. There's a lot of descriptors, and so while each of the concepts can reflect both, we tried to sort of take a chunk of them and put it on one concept and a chunk of them and put it on another concept, because one concept can't really do everything well. We also tried to incorporate more color, graphic elements, typography, and photography to sort of create more of a robust system that you'll have in order to consistently apply the brand. The fonts and colors that we've used, we've tried to sort of use, create palettes and things that evoke a bit more feeling. So the elements are kind of used like a tool to build a mood or the feeling that we're going to build through these key themes. And then, as Therese also mentioned, there's currently some technical problems with the color palette. So when you use a gradient, you're essentially looking at endless numbers of colors. It's sort of an open book of color, really. And so what we've done is we've gone to using, there's a graphic design sort of color matching system called Pantone. And what it essentially does is gives you codes of color that you can sort of consistently try to match across print, web, mobile, which is different than the computer screen, signage, embroidery thread. It covers off sort of everything, and it allows you to have sort of this benchmark standard of your colors that you're trying to achieve.
Right, and so I think just to make it clear, your current logo does not have those Pantone colors. It's just a whole mix of different things. So if you sent this out to one printer and send it out to another, you could get the printing back and the colors could look completely different, just because you don't have a really clear direction that you can give them. And you can't just take those colors and easily have what's called an RGB, for example, for on your computer. You can't just produce that. So literally your logo doesn't have this capability right now to get these colors, because normally the colors from your logo are part of that primary color palette that is then used in your other materials. Okay.
And then Therese had also touched on this. Currently, the materials could easily be reproduced to sort of misrepresent the district, as they don't include design and usage elements that support security. So the key thing that helps in achieving that in this particular case is that we've addressed the typography through a stylized font in the logo design that's sort of modified, and it's not a font that you could just type up in Word. You'd have to purchase it. It would be a little bit more complicated. Another thing we've done through the corporate letterhead design is that we've incorporated the logo, obviously, but also sort of the unique graphic elements, and they run off the edge of the paper. That's called a bleed, and it's not something you can just do on your home printer. You'd have to go to a professional printer in order to have anything run off the edge of the paper. So it really helps in the case of, you know, somebody trying to send out a letter on behalf of the district, but it wasn't the district. It would look a little bit fake if it didn't sort of have these unique security features to it. And then we'll also sort of address within a brand standards manual that we'll hand over at the end of the process who has the right to use the logo and how they can apply it.
Thank you. All right, so that's sort of that. You can. The nice thing is that for every challenge that we noted, there is a design solution that can be applied and is worked into the refresh that we're looking at. We just wanted you to understand literally the practical challenges that were in place and how through some design we can address those. But the other thing, as I mentioned, is we wanted to also be able to develop a brand strategy for you that helps understand, or in the selection of photos and graphics and you know, images and colors and fonts. By doing that, you manage to create a design that conveys a message beyond the words. And so we did a survey of council and staff and asked a number of questions that speak to things like the personality and the image and the values you want to convey. So as an example, we asked the question, if Tofino was a person, what words would you use to describe its personality? So both as a place and as a person. So what we heard back is we took all of the feedback that we got and we pulled together key themes. So, you know, there was a number of people who mentioned, the most people who mentioned certain words, or the most people who mentioned words that were very similar, synonyms for each other, so that we could pull them together and group them into descriptions to help say, okay, this is the personality that the people who represent this community and who work for this community, who know it well, see it. And sometimes it's aspirational, and sometimes this is who we are right now, but this is what we want our image to be in the community. So the key themes, as Sarah mentioned, are going to be applied to the two concepts that we're presenting. But what you're going to see that's very interesting is that while they're all representative, by putting a little bit of emphasis on certain characteristics, it shapes the design differently than if you put them on emphasis on a different set. So we're going to go through that. But for example, when we asked that question about personality, as a place, the keywords that came up most frequently are that Tofino is a place that's calm, cozy, magical. It's fresh and vibrant, but it's also a small town, as well as rugged, remote, and natural. Then as a person, youthful, eclectic, relaxed, laid back, friendly, wholesome, resilient, adventurous, and bold. So the next thing we asked was we asked people to look at it through the lens of you know, if you were talking about the organization. So as opposed to as a person, it's looking at the District of Tofino, the government that is leading the community. And so what we got was, what were the words that you would want to be described as a person if you were the organization? And you want to be seen as compassionate, growing up, inclusive, supportive, reliable, honest, hardworking, responsible, and steady. So, you know, so all of these words together help us start thinking about, okay, what do we need the brand to look like? What do we need it to convey? The next thing we asked about was core values. So the question we asked was, what core values or principles shape both your community and your organization's culture? And so the core values are to be adaptive, you want to be collaborative, good neighbors, you support community sharing, you want to have values that relate to having forward thinking, healthy lifestyle, sustainable, which is really important these days, welcoming, also, not surprisingly, nature, you know, stewardship, respectful, and preserving character. So these were the values or principles that you want to be conveying. The next thing we asked is, you know, what about that message at a glance? So you know, the brand is conveyed through many ways. Certainly we've talked about things like colors, fonts, graphics, images. Of course, there's also the words that you use, and all of those tend to give an at-a-glance reaction from people. And like my son, when he was young, his at-a-glance reaction when he would see the, you know, the big M on McDonald's was pretty quick to respond as a young person, right? That evoked an immediate reaction to him. So those primary messages at a glance, what do we want to convey? And what we heard back when we asked, we said, when people see your branded materials, either printed in signage or online, what is the primary message you want to convey to your community at a glance? So what came back was natural, respect for the environment, preserving character and grounded, so not fad focused, professional, helpful, approachable and competent, and fun West Coast. And then, you know, equally importantly, we asked people, we wanted to get a sense of what do we need to stay way far away from? You know, so in the survey we asked, please complete the sentence. As a community and a local government, we do not want to be viewed as, and I thought these were extremely creative words that people shared in the survey. So we do not want to be viewed as soulless, stagnant, ordinary, apathetic, rude, ungrateful, or superficial. We do not want to be viewed as commercial. We don't want to be viewed as a tourist trap or only tourist town. We don't want to be degraded, goofy, or inauthentic. We do not want to be viewed as exclusive, elitist, expensive or too expensive to live or to visit. And, you know, and when you look at it as an organization in particularly, we do not want to be viewed as bureaucratic, ineffective, unsophisticated, obnoxious, incompetent, or irresponsible. And we don't want to be viewed as colonial, old-fashioned, lazy, corrupt, or secretive. So, you know, all of these words help us to try to understand what is true, the brand of your organization, the description, the personality, and the image that you want to convey through your communication, through your, you know, design, but also through the way you interact with people, through the words you use, through the photos you use. All of it works together to send a message to your communication. So what we're going to do now is that we're going to present to you the concepts. There's two concepts we want to show you. And again, each concept is highlighting certain themes of what we heard from you as far as the personality and values and kind of thing that you want the logo to evoke in people. So it is, we wanted to show you two distinct that work. And it's just that one's highlighting one set of themes and another's highlighting a different, so that they're distinct approaches, so that we can get insight from you on which you think best represents your community. And again, it is really important to remember, do your best as much as you can to separate yourself from reacting in terms of what you personally like or don't like. You know, it's like, well, I don't really like certain colors. We need to put that aside to say, asking ourselves, thinking of those key characteristics, the message we want to convey, which of these two concepts do we feel best conveys that message? And, you know, what approach feels most like the Tofino that I believe in and I want to share with the community and, of course, those beyond your borders. So I'm going to hand it back to Sarah, who's going to run through with you the two concepts. And then after we've run through the two concepts, we're going to show you the existing logo and the two concepts all side by side so that you can look at them. And then we'll be available to answer any questions you have and you know, to discuss as needed what your thoughts are, if that's all right. So Sarah, I'll hand it back to you if you want to run down through the concepts.
Yeah. Okay, so one more slide of words here, and then I promise we're getting to the actual fun visual stuff. So in concept one, this kind of takes about half of the different sort of key themes that Therese just ran through and applies them to this first concept. So I won't go through these again in full detail, but it's about half. So what we're trying to achieve more through this concept is sort of this idea of calm, cozy, magical, natural, remote, youthful, eclectic, relaxed, resilient, compassionate, nature, adaptive, collaborative. So yeah, that is the list, and this is the logo. So this is your first taste of seeing sort of all of this background that we've talked about, all these considerations that we've discussed. So what's happened here is that we're looking at the same overall picture, it's just refreshed. So we're still standing in the same place, we're looking out towards Cat Face and Lone Cone, but we've moved a little bit closer into the trees, which has helped to sort of reduce the extraneous detail. The water and sky have been simplified, and there's contours added into the islands so that they don't just feel kind of like big lumps anymore. The colors are earthy and warm in this concept to sort of play back on those key themes of calm, cozy, magical, laid back. The logotype is got sort of a custom wave element that's been added into it. And the letter forms are sort of a little bit up and down in terms of size so that it feels a little bit more dynamic and friendly. And again, this talks to sort of those security features of making it a lot more difficult to sort of reproduce with ease. And so the other thing is the scale. Obviously you can see here the scale of the symbol portion and the logotype portion is much more equal now. So if we were to put this sort of on that page that Therese mentioned at the end of the previous presentation, you'd actually be able to read District of Tofino now. And so we felt that this, this approach with the concept sort of maintains a little bit of like the vintage flair from your current logo, but modernizes it and addresses all the technical issues that we've discussed. Therese, if you want to go to the next one. So here you can see we've sort of addressed also some of the other issues around not having different orientations and not having a logo that works in different color spaces. So the version that's in the top left there would be considered sort of your primary version, which is what you have now. And then below that is a black only version. And then in the top right, there's a horizontal reverse. And then the bottom left, the color horizontal version. And so this next slide is what I would call a mood board. And so basically, this is sort of trying to outline all the different pieces that could come together to show what would form basically the basis of the brand. And then as well on this slide in the top right, you'll see that it offers up the version of the logo that's just the logo type with the symbol removed, so that you can see it looks much more like a logo even without the crest than it previously. It just would have looked like typed out text. So you'll see sort of larger swatches of the color palette there across the middle to sort of give you a bigger glimpse of sort of that earthy, warm tone that the colors are trying to achieve. There's sample typefaces there in some of the words that we pulled out from the key themes. So these typefaces are meant to sort of feel harmonious with the logo. And also we've factored in things around availability and cost. So these fonts would be free through Google to install basically on all the machines within the organization, so that you can all sort of work towards achieving your new brand. So then we've got sort of a swatch of a pattern there across the middle. This would be like a graphic pattern that you'd see come into play in the sample applications that we'll show you next. And then across the bottom, we've sort of set up a photographic style. So if you look across the photos, you'll notice that they're all quite relaxed. The portrait photo is quite candid. There's sort of a warm golden hour type of lighting to all the photos and selective focus, which means that the things in the background kind of get blurred out. And so here we're showing some samples of corporate stationery. So this is where you can kind of start to see how all those elements that we just showed you on the mood board start to come together in the various visual brand applications. So what we've used is the logo, the colors, the graphic pattern, and the typography. You'll see on the top right-hand corner of the letterhead, that's where we've sort of incorporated those security features. So the pattern bleeds off the edges. That, as I mentioned, is not something you can just do from your home printer. So if you were sending out official letters to residents, it would help to just sort of increase the credibility and make sure that people realize it's actually coming from you. And then on the business card, we've offered 3 different colors from the palette on the back, and it's kind of a nice touch because it starts to show you how this pattern that we've developed, if you apply the different colors, it sort of takes on these different feelings. So the first kind of golden color could feel like tree rings, or it could feel like sand, and the green kind of feels like it could be the topography of a map, or it could be like flora, like bull kelp. It kind of has that stringy look of bull kelp that's lying on the beach. And then, of course, the blue color has sort of the feeling of waves that are crashing in at the shore. And then again, how could you use all of these different elements to come together in an application like a report cover, something totally different, t-shirt. It's a little bit more illustrative in those 2 samples, so it's kind of blown up a little bit more. And then how you can sort of use tints and things to kind of create dimension. And then on this slide, we have shown how you could apply the new brand to the existing signage that's in place in the community. And then on the right, you'll also see that we've applied it to a social media post, and this has been a good opportunity to show how much more legibility you can achieve when you have a much larger logo type. You don't always need to rely on the symbol itself.
So one of the key things that we did look at, that Elise asked us to look at, is because there's a wayfinding plan that was recently developed for the District of Tofino, but not fully implemented yet, was to see how well would the 2 logo concepts work into the existing wayfinding plan. And so that's why we're showing you how those signs would work there on the left, because this is a wayfinding plan that's it's already in place, but we would easily be able to refresh it to work with both of the concepts, because that was important too. When you've got an investment in something, you need to find a way to make it all work. So this is showing how that would come together on the signage. And we do that with the other components of the signs plan, with whatever approach you decide to take. All right.
So that was concept 1. And so for concept 2, we'll essentially run through identical. This one we've highlighted different themes, and so this is sort of the other half of the themes. And so as a community, it's fresh, vibrant, small town, rugged, laid back, friendly, wholesome, adventurous, bold. As an organization, supportive, reliable, honest, hardworking, and steady. And core values: forward thinking, healthy lifestyle, sustainable, welcoming, stewardship, and respectful. So this is concept 2. And again, it's the same viewpoint, just the reduced complexity in the water and the sky, and sort of moved forward into the trees. And in this case, rather than using lines to sort of add detail into the islands, we've just sort of used more solid shapes of shadows. And so the colors here, they are similar to the previous concept in terms of the overall palette, but they're much more bright and vibrant. The colors kind of subtly go out of the lines in this concept, so that it feels a little less perfect and a little more loose and kind of laid back. The typography is simpler, with a sort of a subtle custom curve that's been added. And a fun fact about this logo is that the typeface that the word Tofino is set in is actually a typeface called Tofino that was developed by a local typographer who went to Emily Carr University, and she developed the typeface while she was actually on a trip to Tofino. And so this concept sort of feels, overall, it feels a little bit more simple and fresh and modern. Again, just the different sort of orientations and color spaces and how it looks. and then into a mood board. So again, in the top right, you can see sort of how that curve in the typography helps it to sort of have sort of a bit of a feeling of a logo instead of just something that's typed out. And then you can really see here in those big color swatches how much brighter and sort of more vibrant the colors are. In this approach, we've tried to incorporate a graphic pattern that kind of feels like enamel camp dishes, could feel like constellations, or kind of like splashing water. And then the photography is crisp and saturated and sort of intentionally aligned with the color palette. Here's the corporate stationery samples. So you can see sort of there's two different sort of personalities that we can achieve through the use of patterns. So on the letterhead, you can see there's sort of a splash effect. And the splash is actually an element that was taken directly from your current wayfinding signage plan. So it kind of feeds the two things together really well. And then on the business card, you can see what would happen if we sort of applied it more as like the enamel or constellation look. The back of the business card also shows how you can sort of semi-reverse the logo. So the type is white, but the crest remains in color. This one is showing again the report cover and the t-shirt. For the report cover, you can see like you could really sort of have large, bold typography. And again, at the bottom, using sort of the splash motif that's in the current wayfinding. And then on the t-shirt, we've sort of worked in that little constellation look at the bottom of the shirt. And then for the signage, we've tweaked it to use the brand colors and added the new logo. But as with the previous concept, we've largely left it fundamentally the same. And then for the social media post, again, showing the use of just the logo type. And so here, basically what we've tried to do is just sort of show you the three logos side by side so that you can kind of see them together and see the context of what's changed and how different it looks. And then on the next slide, showing you the horizontal versions, which you currently don't have, so it hasn't changed at all there on the left.
And if you think of it, and you're looking at it like this, or even like this, it's easier to see in the concept one that the highlighted key themes of what you said you want to share as the personality and image, the key themes that are emphasized in that first one are things like calm, cozy, magical, natural, remote, as well. And then organizationally, it's like compassion, inclusive. Those are some of the words from concept one. And then you look at concept two, and the key themes are the image personality that you're emphasizing in that one is the fresh, vibrant, small town, rugged. Organizationally, it's supportive, reliable, honest, hardworking, steady. So you can see how by emphasizing certain elements, we get two very distinct options as far as concepts that were developed from the feedback. And all of them address the technical aspects, or both of them address the technical challenge that we had at the start. So I'll leave those up, but that is, that's the summary of our presentation around the need and the practical solutions, as well as the creative approaches to reflect the brand personality that you shared with us. Are there any questions or things that you'd like to just share on this?
I'll just look to counselors to put their hand up or let me know if there's any questions. Councillor Law.
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Thanks for this so much. So I just want to ask, what kind of feedback are you looking for from us right now? Is it either or are you looking for suggestions or anything else, or for clarification? What would you like to hear?
We are really hoping to get direction on the preferred concept so that we can move forward with the development of the brand guidelines and other templates, that kind of thing that we want to build for you. But we can't, of course, take that step until council tells us which of the two concepts you'd like us to move forward with.
Anything else, Councillor Law?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate elements of both designs. I was actually wondering if there was a possibility to incorporate some of the elements into, you know, is there any changes you're looking for? I'm just wondering what if you're looking just in either or are you looking for any other suggestions from council? That's really my question.
Yeah. We're of course open to feedback. There are things that it won't necessarily work to sort of drag them across from one concept to the other, but obviously we'd like to hear what you guys think, and you know, any sort of questions, concerns, likes, dislikes, and then that way if we can come to a conclusion, that would be ideal, and then we'll move forward from there. If we need to make some tweaks, then we would address that sort of afterward, but ideally just to try and sort of solidify which way we're going.
Okay, maybe we'll just go around the table. Councillor Chalmers next.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the presentation, and I really love the first one. I think it definitely has a better feel for Tofino. The second one doesn't really ring for me. The only hesitation I have on the first one is the word Tofino feels a bit touristy to me. Like it makes me think of Destination BC or like a tourist destination marketing word, which is what we are, but because we have tourism Tofino, I can't quite put my finger on it, but when I see that word, I think of sort of a marketing thing as opposed to a destination. So if I had to pick one of the two, 100% I'd pick the first one. But if there is the ability for tweaking, there's something about the word Tofino that I don't know how good that is, but something, a little change or something there.
Okay, who'd like to go next? I don't have everyone on my screen.
No problem, Councillor Anderson. It's
okay.
Councillor McQuaid. I'm happy to go next. Yeah, I had much the same sentiment. I was a big, stronger fan of the second one than the third. One concern I had was that while I do understand that the mountains look a little, just a little bit like two lumps there, they are actually a vista that you can see from downtown and are recognizable, I think, to the community as they are. So I just, you know, when looking at the new mountains, I do understand that they are visually perhaps a little bit more appealing, but they might not be best representative of what Tofino actually sees when it looks out. So there are definitely.
They are actually traced directly off of a photograph. So the physical forms of those mountains is probably, it should be equally as representative of those mountains.
Wild. That is definitely not a viewpoint that I have seen. So thanks for making sure that I look just a little bit closer these days. That's great. District of Tofino, the Tofino for me just felt a little bit spread out, like perhaps a little bit wide. If there's a possibility to tighten it up, I'm not sure. I had some of the same feelings that Councillor Chalmers did. I really love the District of, and I like the differentiation in fonts for Tofino, but there was something there that just felt a little wider for me, or a little too wide for me. And every kind of application that you showed us looked incredible. The only one that gave me hesitancy was the business cards. They, yeah, they just, I think there's something about Tofino in that context that just didn't feel as professional for me, and I'm not really sure why. But it just felt a little it just felt more fun than I'm prepared to be as a counselor, I guess. I'm not really sure what it is, but it just had a little bit more whimsy there than or something that I just wasn't sure if it was, again, the spacing or, yeah, there was just, I apologize that I don't have the proper language, but that's the best that I can do. Thanks.
And just as a clarification, Counselor, thank you. I just want to, are you referring to the front of the business card or the back of the business card? So
the back, yeah, it's just, it's the district, like the logo, and in every other application, I really liked, like when it was outward facing to the community, but there was something when it was in correspondence, or like if I was sending a sternly worded letter as you know, bylaw, or if I was handing out business cards, I'm not sure that it had the air of not corporate, but just a business feel that I would expect.
So, and so it's the graphic element that is feeling that way, as opposed to the logo itself.
Just the District of Tofino portion.
Oh, this part here.
Yeah, I just loved it in every other application. It was just kind of when I saw it on business correspondence that something, yeah, like I love it on all of these, but the reality when I was thinking of it being like internal or external communications to other levels of government or other counselors, it gave me a little bit of pause. So. Right.
So it was this and do you feel like it was this orientation on the cards that was doing that for you? So when we talk about orientation, we mean, you know, this is a horizontal orientation. This is a vertical orientation. So I'm trying to get a sense of what element of it that was feeling whimsical, like if it was.
I think it's still just the Tofino, just the font. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And the rest of it is, I just think it's really great, and I really love the demonstration of the various applications. It was nice. It was nice to see it across the spectrum and see how it would be used. That was really helpful.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Sorry, I had to keep asking questions. It's just trying to understand for sure that we're getting it right.
No, that's great. I don't have the best language when it comes to things like this, so I appreciate all the questions. That's really helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, we'll go back.
Okay, we'll go back to Councillor Chalmers, and Councillor Steer popped up there for a minute, and then we'll go to him. Councillor Chalmers.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Anderson. I just wanted to follow up after Councillor McQuaid, because that actually kind of tied, I couldn't quite place my finger on it, and I think I feel the same way as Councillor McQuaid. That's where I was getting the touristiness. It seemed fun and welcoming, but in the business senses, I think. So I want to say that it's the same for me as well.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Steer.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation, and I think my colleagues might concur. I would be considered the epitome of outdated, so some of my comments might not be as helpful as the others. I did, in terms of the concepts, concept 2 is the one that struck me the most, in reflecting on what you had asked in terms of the sentiments towards how I felt about Tofino, and I think probably either one of the graphics, to be honest, was fine for me. Once again, I think I would echo Councillor McQuaid and Councillor Chalmers. The font on concept 1, the Tofino portion, just does not work for me. It seemed, you had pointed out in one point, or one of the explanations about timelessness, and I don't find that that would be reflective of a timeless approach, whereas the concept 2 font most certainly did feel that way for me. So in terms of the graphics, I was comfortable with either, to be honest, in terms of the concepts that we were trying to bring forward. I thought the concept 2 font had a more timeless feel to it, and I would agree in terms of a more corporate approach, if that would be the appropriate wording. And I also did like the factor that the font was actually developed from a student with Tofino in mind. So I did appreciate that. I don't think I have anything else to add, unless there was the ability for that to be directly applied to in a tattoo format, but I'm not sure if that's possible.
I'm sure we can arrange that quickly. Okay, Councillor McMaster, did you have any comments?
In terms of the logo, I prefer concept 1. I just think that's more realistic. The concept 2 with the colour of the ocean reminds me more of the Mediterranean than Tofino. I agree with everybody else about the actual word Tofino. I don't like that style. Having said that, I don't actually like the style used in concept 2 either. So I'd like something that's different, but maybe not quite as quirky as that. It almost reminds me of the bus shelter at the tourism centre, the way the T is shaped. So the logo, definitely concept 1, and I think we need to work on the word Tofino.
Okay, Councillor McMaster. I had a question about the font. You mentioned that concept 1, the font was free. Does that mean that concept 2, we would have to pay and maybe or subscribe to that font?
So the fonts that are used in the logo wouldn't necessarily be the ones that would be used in sort of typesetting applications. They'd be used more by a professional designer, whereas the ones that would be used within like a report that you're typing up, those would be, in both cases, we could specify Google fonts, which are completely free. So there'd be the ability in both concepts to sort of maintain your brand throughout your application.
So the fonts in the actual logo are purchased fonts, both of them, as opposed to free fonts. That also is one of the reasons we do that as well, is because we're using them just for the design of the logo in this case, and that makes it not as easy for people to just reproduce them.
Right, okay. My reactions to them, I like them both, but for different reasons. I like the color, the vibrant colors in concept 2. I think they stand out a little bit more on letterhead, but in the applications, I like the colors in concept 1. I like the more, the less whimsical Tofino font in concept 2. I'm not really sure about the white lines in the hills on concept 1, and it seems like more detailed than necessary, but I can see that when you work it with those sort of contour lines that you're thinking of sort of combining on letterhead and other applications, how those might need to stay for that reason. I'm a little bit worried about the colors in concept 1. They seem a little bit sort of too current, and they may go out of style at some point. So I don't know if you subscribe to any color forecasting or use that in your design, but I'm just wondering if they might be just too current to hold up over time.
Just
yeah.
to on that, the colors really are trying to go back to achieving those key themes. So in 1, it's trying to be a little bit more warm and earthy, and then in 2, it's trying to be a little bit more fresh and vibrant. So that's sort of where those key things,
Right.
the differences came from. It's less to do with trend and more just to do with trying to create the mood.
And the other thing that's really neat about a logo, in part, especially for a local community, is that you want your colors to be fairly distinct, and then they become representative of you as well, so that so that people start to see those colors, much the same way that if like I said earlier, if you see the color of the McDonald's, that's a yellow that you associate there. The color of the red in Coca-Cola is a color you associate with Coke. So a brand color becomes something that people see and make a connection to your community, as opposed to something that is current or otherwise. It actually becomes something that you own. It's hard to explain. I know when we worked on the city of Coquitlam, the biggest challenge we had when we worked together, Sarah worked on that project with me when I was director of communications in Coquitlam, was to come up, because everybody wanted green and blue for sure. And the greater challenge was not to come up with a green or blue that would be current or otherwise, but rather to come up with a green and blue that would be distinctive and distinctively different from the greens and blues in other logos. And so one of the things that Sarah looks at when she's looking at this is, what are the colors that best represent the personality of the brand that you want to communicate, but also what are those things that are going to help keep your colors distinctive from others in your area for that kind of salience.
Okay, thanks. I guess my last comment, and this might be just sort of a personal perspective, or the concept one, the hills in the background of Lone Cone, they look like a pair of lips looming on the horizon to me. And I don't know if anyone else sort of sees that, but
Okay.
that might be a good thing. I'm not sure, but it certainly sort of jumps out at me.
Okay.
So, and I think overall, I kind of like concept 2 better, but I like the colors in concept 1 too. I don't know. It's the most difficult kind of decisions, these design decisions.
It kind of is, and the other thing that we find, and we talked to Elise about this, and Bob as well, is that sometimes it's having it in front of you, and they've looked at it, and you kind of get that sense of, that's why I've left this up like this, because sometimes the more you look at something, the more one starts to pull more than the other, just from your own feelings about the community and how you want it to be represented. But what I'm hearing is that there's a fair amount of support for concept 1 in terms of the colors, but there's a concern about the font treatment in the word Tofino that we could look at to see, what adjustment can there be made in that to capture it. And we can also, the other key thing I think I've heard from you is to have another look at the mountains treatment to see if there's anything else that we could do to have it feel like you're looking at that view when you look at that. So even as Sarah said, it was traced from a photo, but when you get to a graphic, it's a little bit different. So we can definitely, look at that. How could we show those differently? Because of course, now that I'm looking at it and you told me it looks like lips, all I can see is lips. So like, once you do, I've been looking at this for months and I never saw that, right? But this is the chance to look at those things. So we will definitely look at these and then look at how do we incorporate your feedback for you. But I think it's making sense from what I'm hearing. It seems to make most sense to make some changes to concept 1 to see how to address some of the concerns with concept 1. As that looks like the one that we can work the most with to come back to you with something. Does that sound okay to you if that's the approach we take?
I think that gathers the feedback of council pretty well.
Sorry to butt in there, Mayor Anderson. I did want to say just a couple comments. I didn't get a chance to put my comments in there yet. So thank you. Sorry to butt in. I had my hand up, but I think Mayor Anderson, you probably didn't see me.
No, I only have 5 people on the screen at a time when there's a shared screen. So just jump in. Go ahead.
Sure, thanks. I do want to concur. Just a couple of points. I really appreciate everybody's comments, and I do appreciate that you've worked very hard, and I can see the themes coming through in both of the logos that you've presented. So I do think you did that well. I just have a couple comments. One of them is the white lines in the mountain. I believe Mayor Anderson, Acting Mayor Anderson spoke that. To me, I think a literal reading of those lines could be either logging roads or even a ski hill. And of course, that would be antithetical to Lone Cone and stuff like that. So that's my one comment there. And I did want to say that perhaps the whimsical nature of the first font had to do with the baseline, the undulating baseline. It does create a sort of an unstable feeling, and so that was something I just wanted to point out. I do like them both. I'm happy to go with whatever council permits. I do think I prefer the first one for the colors. a tweak on the font and the white lines. And I do find that when my eye travels over the logo, I do get a little stuck on the horizontal skylines or cloud lines there, and that's just something I always think about when I watch when I look at art or graphics, is where my eye gets stuck. And so that's just something I want to throw out there. But well done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It's nice that the feedback is all really consistent too. It makes it much easier for us to understand how to move forward with some other, tweaks to it to show you.
Okay, I'll just ask you when you might come back, what the next steps are.
I would defer to Elise, I guess, on that one, to ask her what the schedule is as well, because I know we're heading into Christmas season. So,
Elise, are you there?
Sorry, just paying attention to a few things. So the next meeting in January is January 12th, and then I'd have to pull up the schedule to see the meetings after that. But yeah, sorry, let me just pull up the schedule for 2021. Can I get back to everyone on this? It's just going to take me a little bit to control the meeting as well as look this up on the same computer. I don't want to screw
What
up
I
the
was
recording.
looking for was from Sarah and Teresa. You said you're going to sort of work with the first design one, concept one, and maybe do a couple tweaks, and so you would be ready to present back to council in a month or 6 weeks or something like that. That's sort of what I was wondering.
Oh, okay, sorry, I misunderstood. I thought you meant what meeting would we come back to. Sarah, can you speak to that since the bulk of the work is yours?
Yeah, yeah, I think probably closer to the end of January at least would work better, just because we are coming into Christmas, and we were hoping to have this process wrapped up much sooner. And Elise, I'm sure, didn't mention the fact that I was very pregnant and now have a baby as a coworker, so that's slowed me down to working on Tofino time. So probably more realistic would be closer to the end of January. The 12th could work, but I don't want to make a promise, so maybe the next meeting after that would be better, but certainly within January I think is realistic.
Okay, I don't think there's any urgency to this, but of course we want to keep moving on it. Okay, I think you have enough feedback from committee at this point. So we'll thank you for your presentation and your work. I think it's great that the logo reflects the history of the old logo. And yeah, we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present it. And we'll be back to you in January.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just look at the meeting schedule. Apologies for the delay. And so there is another committee of the whole on February 1st, and then the second meeting is in late January on the 26th. So I think we'll be aiming for a time around then to come back to council with a bit of a refresh.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas.
Yes, you too. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll continue on our agenda here to item 7.2, wastewater treatment plant project update. And we have a report from Engineering and Public Works. And I believe we're being joined by some of the people we've been consulting with on the project. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Work, I guess.
Your Worship, I'll just maybe make a few introductory remarks, and then Fraser can walk you through a PowerPoint that's brief and based on the report that Council received last week. So I'm not going to go through the long history that I always want to walk through with respect to liquid waste management plan and the wastewater treatment plant, but suffice it to say we've been at this for 20 years as a community. And in the summer, as Council will recall, we finished a tender process for a wastewater treatment plant that had been designed, and found that the project value did not align with our budget. So in the last little while, we've been underway with some work so that we can start to get better alignment, I guess, and Fraser is going to walk you through that. So joining us from outside of the organization today, Tyler Barber and Al Gibb from WSP, and Jonathan Huggett, who has been working with us as a project leader with project leadership experience, and he's worked with Fraser on some difficult problems in Victoria. So Fraser's going to walk us through a presentation, and then we're certainly here to answer questions from council. Fraser and I will answer what we can, but we may call on our guests as well to assist with more technical items. Over to you, Fraser.
Thanks, Bob, and good evening, Mayor and Council. I'll share screen here now and click over to the presentation. Bear with me for 1 second. Can I just confirm that Council can see that screen? Okay. Thanks, Bob, for the introductions. As the CAO mentioned, I'll step through quite a brief presentation that hits on some of the highlights that are from the council report that's been presented to council as part of the meeting, and then we'll be available, of course, to answer any questions at the end. So, as a way of introduction and background, I just wanted to highlight that the 2020 procurement process did end up in 2 bids being received at around $82 million. Both bids were deemed materially or substantively non-compliant, and both, of course, exceeded the project budget of $55 million. The district then retained both the support of WSP and Mr. Huggett to do a more detailed review and a deep dive into the bids and the submissions with a specific focus on cost and cost drivers and potential savings, with the ultimate intent to define a way ahead that would both look at recovering the project to closer to or to within budget, as well as retaining and recovering some project schedule. The problem before us, of course, is that we cannot afford to construct the approved plan as it was bid on through the procurement process. So we must find some improvements to be made where we can drive down the cost, but still deliver a suitable wastewater treatment plant that would meet its required capabilities of wastewater treatment, but also maintain through life costs within reasonable limits for the life of the infrastructure, as well as maximizing community benefit. I'll talk a bit more about those here shortly. The project risks, in summary, can be framed as overall affordability, which is the driving constraint for the project, which is a representation of both the initial procurement or the capital costs, but as well as the through-life operating costs. So we must be careful moving forward that we manage both of those different cost portfolios as best we can. The design suitability really means that we would get a fit-for-purpose design, we have a sustainable design, and we have a design that allows us to meet our objectives without necessarily having excessive design features, but also offering the redundancy that would be appropriate for operations in a life here on the West Coast, which is far away from different supports, both logistically and material, and experts themselves. So we have to find the right balance in the design to meet those both performance and costs requirements. We have, of course, to be able to meet our environmental remit, which is to treat sewage before it enters the ocean environment. And we have to do all of this with the best interests of community in mind the whole way, whether that be the construction phase and minimizing negative impacts or externalities on the community, or the through-life impact of an industrial facility such as a wastewater treatment plant, controlling odor and different things that make sure that the community realizes benefit without undue hardship. We did a review of the bids, which was the submissions from NAC and ACON. and we compared those in more detail with our quantity surveyor's estimate from early 2019. We found some highlighted takeaways from that review, which are highlighted in some more detail in the report, but overall, we found that the cost overruns were most often linked with civil works, especially on the actual site of the wastewater treatment plant and the structures of the buildings. We noted that conveyancing costs are just under 20% of the total project value. And within those submissions of both site construction, site preparation, and the construction of the buildings, we found that, of course, the imported labor makes up a significant portion of the costs for the overall bids that were submitted. So if we want to search for cost savings, we have to find some wins, and we've been able to identify where we would go looking most heartfully to realize those savings, which of course require additional work, assessment, design, and review, as well as planning, which has to be, and carefully balancing the risks of increased time and cost to do those redesigns and those reapproaches or those changes with the actual savings that we would hope to achieve, all of which will be defined through the recommended next steps of procurement in our relationships and contract relationships with the contractor. So what we would do here moving forward was we would focus on reducing the number and or size, complexity, and quality of the buildings, especially at the wastewater treatment site. We would look at the opportunities to prefabricate our buildings offsite to reduce the amount of in situ or local labor that we would import. We would remove some discretionary items like washrooms at the Main Street pump station and look at finding other ways to deliver such public amenities. And in all cases, we would be searching for cheaper alternatives, both equipment and materials, as well as constructability, so that we could potentially realize the savings that we search, and all of which would require deep and meaningful planning and design and discussions with a contractor, that we could take their inputs and use those to shape the new way forward. The controls, or the way that we would manage the risk for those, would be to enter into a new procurement approach, which I'll talk about in a second, to allow us to, with that contractor, a successful contractor, to deep dive into the technology, the layout, the design aspects, so where we can find the savings from above that are listed above, and carefully manage with our owner's engineer to make sure that we didn't sacrifice levels of redundancy, performance, supportability, costs through life, and capital when we do some of those changes, or when we realize some of those changes. The procurement approach has a stepwise summary, which is highlighted here, which includes the development of an RFP that would allow both of the bidders to re-engage with the district to provide new proposals for how they could see us realizing some of those savings and recovering our schedule. We would begin drafting a contract, which we would start negotiating with a successful proponent once the evaluation had been reviewed and awarded. And then we would begin that deeper, harder work of going through the design optimization and the constructability optimization with the intent to realize those savings. This work portfolio has been highlighted in what could be conveyed as a best case schedule scenario for the district, but it's important to start planning around what we would hope to achieve as far as milestones throughout the 2021 calendar year. And this would look at us in the first quarter is getting through that RFP process and valuation, and being back in front of council to present on the outcomes of that RFP process, and then moving through the contract award and getting into the hard work as we described in the last slide, so that we could actually have shovels in the ground as close to the end of 2021 as possible. Several options have been highlighted for council for the way forward, which basically include two different options different options, which is to continue planning or to move towards actual contracts and work. The first option, which is the recommended option, would invite the two bidders to participate in this new RFP process, award that to the highest quality submission, and then move with the contract to get on the planning, design, and constructability and design optimization exercise. Option 2 would look at entering into negotiation with the previous bidder based on the original project planning. Option 3, continue planning with additional consultant support. And option 4 would be defer project. Somewhat coarse set of options presented to council here, all of which have their risks and benefits, which staff suggests the highest benefits and rewards ratio would be to pursue option 1, the recommended option set to progress through this new construction management RFP process to hopefully be in a position to start construction early with a revised design that came closer to our $55 million budget. The recommendation before council today is cut and pasted here in the PowerPoint slide and in the first page of the council report, which is to retain that consultant support to move through this recommended process and RFP, and to report back to council on the outcomes of that process with a recommendation of next steps prior to any contract award. That slide there on the recommendations, and I'll leave the presentation there, and as council starts the questions, I'll flip the presentation off so that more of the gallery can be seen by the participants. And that concludes the short presentation here today, and I'm more than happy to entertain questions now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Work. Yes, Councillor Steer has his hand up.
Great, thank you, Fraser, and I appreciate the report. It's been a long, arduous process, as Bob has pointed out. I do want to start off by just my support for moving forward with the option 1 that was recommended, and I noted that there was a potential cost in there of around $40,000 to $60,000 to support that process, and the recommending the implementation of the proposed RFP process. I support the direction being proposed, and I want to thank you for the detailed background and blueprint for moving forward. I will refrain from all the ranting and ravings around this whole process that has gone on. I did want to, I had one question around, well, more of a comment than maybe a question, is that my concerns around any of the potential design changes that might be incorporated, that how that might be reflected in the overall operating costs for the long-term sort of operating costs of the facility, and to understand that that would be front and center for a lot of the, well, for me in general, but in terms of the community and those that will be paying that bill for the operating over the life of this facility. And the other question maybe is more directed to Bob at CAO. I was just curious as to maybe what the communications have been with the province or the feds around the financial implications that have come forward with the process that was previous, and if there was any discussions around any further contributions to the project from the province or the feds.
Okay, maybe we'll turn that question to Mr. McPherson, and then we'll see who wants to speak to the operating costs. Go ahead.
Sure. So I'll speak to operating costs also, and
okay.
From the very start of this process, operating costs have been at least much, and I would say more, in our mind than capital costs, for a couple of reasons. Operating costs go on for forever. So if this lasts for 60 years with some upgrades, we're paying the operating costs. And I think that Councillor Steer alluded to the fact that the operating costs are paid 100% by the local community, where, of course, with capital costs, we have other funders, almost to a point where it's $100 to 1. Better to spend $100 in capital rather than one annual dollar in operating, or maybe even a little bit more than that. With respect to the financing from senior level of government, we had some dialogue early on in the process with our contacts in what used to be municipal affairs and housing, have outlined the problem for them, have let them know that this is something that the District of Tofino just can't, we just can't add any more money to this issue. So I know how it works for us is the province is the kind of the window to funding, and they then work with the feds. So I believe that they had some dialogue with the federal government, when we started going on this, our initial thought was, well, we just need to get more money. And then, after a few weeks of thinking that way, we said the responsible thing for us to do is to see what we can do to make this project more affordable for all taxpayers. So we've asked the province just to kind of hold the thought, and we were going to get back to them with a future process and some ideas around what the savings might be, as well as looking for a bit of an unusual funding mechanism. So not just looking for here's a $80 million project, here's a $70 million project, but looking for a partnership in making the financial decisions along with us. So that's, after we hear from council tonight, that's one of the immediate next steps for me, is to renew that discussion.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Any other comments on Councillor Steer's questions from any other of the panel members? If not, we'll move to Councillor McMaster.
Just a question for Fraser. Considering the 2 bids received were non-compliant, why wouldn't you throw out the RFP process to all the bidders? Or all the people that were originally polled?
Thanks, Councillor McMaster, for the question. There has been some discussions with the consultants about how far-reaching we would actually release the RFP, having some history where bidders fell off on the procurement process or opted out either right away or later in the process. I'll probably start here with a couple of questions and look to Bob to see if he has anything else to add. But I think essentially the only 2 consultants that followed through on the process to its completion and reviewed in high levels of intimate detail the problem before us, the case here in Tofino, the engineering that was required to put in the conveyancing lines, that attended the site meetings and then really invested in the actual civil works and problem solving, were the 2 bidders that submitted. And we feel that it would take some time to get the other proponents or another consultant or contractor group up to speed. So there has been some discussion about that, and I'm not sure if the CAO has anything to add that would be material here, but that was essentially the rationale, is that those were the 2 that went the distance and invested in the analysis required to submit.
Just trying to understand where Councillor McMaster is going a little bit. We certainly are looking for a competitive process to take us to the next steps. Yeah, I did think about the other. We as council may recall, we shortlisted to 4 potential general contractors. One dropped out almost immediately. The other wanted a project that was, I guess, different than what we thought. So we found we had a bit of a gap, not only in approach, but so many aspects of this project. So we feel like the 2 that we have remained engaged throughout the process. They're checking in on us. They've been really terrific in providing feedback about how we might be able to find some savings in this project. And we think we have 2 interested parties that will provide us with a good competitive process.
I'm just wondering, the fact that you're adopting a different process, I just wondered whether there might be more interest from other parties.
Okay.
Yeah, through the mayor, I think that there is the potential that other parties could be interested, but there are no other parties that committed the same amount of resources into furthering the Tofino wastewater treatment plant than the 2 bidders that we're currently engaging with. So I think that there there is some risks if we open it wider that it could take more time. It also, I think, is somewhat of a consideration or a factor that the two bidders that submitted before, although were found materially non-compliant, was really based on administrative errors in the submission process. And then, like the CEO have said, have demonstrated a much stronger level of project understanding and a much stronger level of an intention and motivation to engage with the district on solving this particular problem. So we will for sure make sure that we don't proceed down any of these roads without meeting our legal obligations when it comes to competitive processes, but feel that it's fair and reasonable to move forward with this approach.
Thanks. Anything else, Councillor McMaster?
No, I think I would be happier if there was more than two. I have to say that.
Okay. Other committee members, questions? Councillor Law?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Anderson. This question for Fraser. What is the scope of the design review that WSP and the district are looking at? Does it offer the potential for radically different designs, or is it basically the same primary site, but just with cost savings and redesigning that site? Like, is WCSP going to be able to offer any, other options, or is it just a redesign?
That's through the mayor. I think that's a really important question about, how deep could these changes really go, and would that force us to amend the liquid waste management plan or change the expectations of community? It's been a central theme in the discussions we've had thus far. And right now, all of our discussions maintain the current site for the wastewater treatment plant, maintain the outfall locations, both of which were two constant and primary themes in engagement with community. We do, however, understand that there are potential savings within working in the wastewater treatment site, within working with that outfall, that could realize meaningful savings, below the 80s of millions and clawing back savings back towards that 55 million. WSP has always guided and cautioned the district that major redesigns come with their own risks, of course, and with their own time in order to realize the changes. So with that being said, we do understand that there is potential savings for simplifying the site, the building layouts or configuration, some of the design treatments, as well as some of the design qualities. We will always be looking as we go forward in that scope of work that we define through the RFP process to carefully walk that tightrope and balance these risks of additional time and additional cost to do redesign with the benefits of achieving some redesign to realize those savings. So it really is going to be a careful balancing act where we'll continue to be guided by the ones who know the project the most, which is WSP, of course, as well as looking at tapping into what the contractors have already highlighted as significant areas for savings if we can move outside of the constraints of the current design, especially as it pertains to constructability. Some design changes will give them more flexibility to do the designs and to build the plant in a different way. And we want to make sure that we make smart moves now so that we could realize those types of savings.
Thank you.
Is that everything, Councillor Law?
Yeah, I did have another question about the solidity of the 55 million, and I think it is in there, and I think I'll pass on that one for now. Okay.
Councillor Chalmers or Councillor McQuaid, did you have anything? No? Okay. My questions was, I'm more familiar with something called the design build concept. Is this sort of approaching that sort of way of tackling it? Is this like a design build concept?
I might hand it off to either CAO or one of the consultants to talk about the subtle nuances, but it essentially is bringing back some of those design levers back into the discussion rather than just build this design which we've provided. So it essentially is sort of walking back the process a little bit to bring more of those design flexibilities and design decision making back into the process again. If we want to talk about discrete MMCD or contract nomenclature, I'd have to defer to one of the sort of more learned colleagues here on the call.
Did anyone want to speak to that that's joined us?
I don't know about more learned, but it is Your Worship, very. I think it's like an evolved design build where it's an integrated design process where what we would have is we would have our design engineers, the district design engineers, the contractors in the district in the same room, working through decisions together, with the district essentially playing kind of a referee role.
Okay. Another question I had. Oh, sorry. Was somebody else was going to speak? No. Okay. Another question I had. I'm just wondering if we've learned anything from other remote locations that may be looking at putting in treatment along the same timelines. I know that the sewage treatment has been mandated by the federal government to do, and we're hitting it very late in the deadline. So I'm wondering if there were other communities out there that were remote and maybe there's lessons to be learned about what we could do here that might apply. Anyone got any ideas there?
Through you, Mayor, what can we learn from adjacent or municipalities that are remote and are facing some of the same challenges has been a central discussion theme for us since probably before the bids actually were submitted, to be honest. Even just small plants in communities like Bamfield, I think that went over their budget. Their submissions came in over about 50% over for much smaller infrastructure projects, but still with some of the same factors in play. WSP, of course, as industry experts, are plugged into a lot of the different projects that are either in the planning phases or in some cases the implementation phases in and around the southwestern part of the province, including Sunshine Coast and some of these other areas that have a need to import the materials and the labor to actually affect such large infrastructure programs. We've got some feedback from the support industry folks that talk about what cost escalation and what some of the effects of like COVID are having on building big projects in industry scale or infrastructure here on the island. And in most cases, I wouldn't necessarily say that we're learning a bunch of lessons about what we can do to protect ourselves from such risks, other than we're learning how common these types of risks are. And I'll stop there and see if the CAO wants to add to that. But we're definitely trying to maintain heads on a swivel here so that we understand if anyone has had some successes with certain approaches that we're agile enough to quickly learn from them as we move forward.
Aside from just reflecting on the design that we have and questioning decisions that we've made and designing things differently. In terms of construction, Jonathan, who's on here, has been really encouraging us to build as much offsite as possible, and we think there are some real savings there, where whoever is building it in a warehouse in Richmond, you're not paying them to drive to Tofino, you're not paying them to sleep in a bed that's not their own, and those costs really were adding up, as well as the cost of concrete out here on the coast is very significant. The other thing that we have seen from others is that they are, I think I described to council a few months ago how the equipment purchase was challenging for the general contractors, where they're getting prices 15 minutes before they had to submit their bids. So, one saving we might find that may not amount to millions and millions of dollars, but is pre-purchasing equipment. Well, first of all, having options for equipment and equivalencies for equipment, and then pre-purchasing that equipment and storing it ourselves, rather than it being kind of a last-minute rush that we ended up with, where the equipment manufacturers may not have had our best interests at heart when they were pricing things.
Okay. My final question, unless there were other responses to that one, I'll just leave it for a sec, was how it affects the whole public process part of it. We have an obligation to have a public committee on this. So I understand some of it will have to go back to that committee. Can anyone speak to that?
Sure, I can start again and see if there's any comments after. We have looked at or been advised through discussions with our owner's engineer, as well as some of the historical discussions that happened before my arrival, of course, of our duty to consult with stakeholders and rights holders in the region. We're not necessarily sure how deep some of the changes may be recommended or proposed in order for us to realize all of the different objectives that we want to reach. But we have talked as part of our planning discussions about the requirement for us to re-engage with community, to potentially have that governance structure rebooted so that we can actually facilitate those discussions in a meaningful way, and be able to dialogue with some of those trade-offs, which are of course part of the way forward, unavoidably so. So I think through my discussions with the CAO, the expectation is of course that we will engage as required when required, once we have a little bit more information to hand, and that we will set up those the right structures for that dialogue to make sure that those needs are met as we move forward.
Okay. I'll turn it back to the committee if there's any final comments or questions before we move on to looking at the resolution, the recommendation, I mean. Anything else? Councillor Law?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Anderson. Yeah, Fraser, I just want to be clear. The goal here is to bring the cost down to 55 million. That's a pretty hard line. But there's also price escalation. You know, there's cost uncertainties in that first option that we're considering. And what happens if we cannot get it down that far with what we want? Where does it go from there? That makes a pretty simple question, but are you fairly confident that this will get down to a manageable cost?
Through the mayor, literally the $1 million question. I think we're going to drive as hard as we can towards that $55 million threshold. We also have identified through the report that there's significant number of risks that would potentially get us there, that will be hard decision points for us as staff to make those recommendations, and then for council to consider. While we have done some estimating, it really will depend on this discussion that happens in the next phase with the contractor to see and test what's realistic, and to see how close we can get to that 55 million. And then I'll look to the CAO, who's untoggled his mute button, to maybe jump in there as we talk about, you know, if where we're at within respect to say 55 or 60 million, what that means for us moving forward from a affordability perspective.
Yeah, and through the chair, we're confident that we can do a lot better than $80 million. The level of confidence of how close we can get to 55, I think, would vary throughout the group that's been talking about this for the last 3 months. But remembering at the same time the discussion that we had 20 minutes ago, that we don't want to keep driving the capital cost down and be paying for operating costs and replacing equipment that breaks after 5 years. So we're going to be working really hard on trying to achieve that balance. What happens next after we kind of get a better sense of what it costs is that's, we're back to our funding partners to see how they can close the gap. Certainly, we have the folks at Municipal Affairs staff at a staff level want to work with us, and we have the tremendous advantage of the new Minister of Municipal Affairs is very, very, very aware of the challenge that we have here, and is aware of the kind of the chicken and egg of finding the best value means we don't really know what the project will cost in 3 weeks or 5 weeks. It's a very long process that we have to go through.
Yeah, I just want to thank you all for your hard work too. It's a difficult project. So.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Thanks for getting this back to council and in a relatively short time, considering the size of the project. Our last look at it was in September, so I've been looking forward to seeing what would come forward. I believe that we may be looking at option 1 as a path forward here. And I've heard Councillor Steer express support for that. I don't think any of the options really adequately address Councillor McMaster's concern. I'm not sure what it would mean if we went back to a more competitive process. I hope Councillor McMaster was satisfied with the rationale behind moving in this direction. Just wondering if somebody is, would you like to move forward with that recommendation at this point? And just, I guess as a reminder, I believe this committee of the whole is the steering committee for the project. Is that correct, Mr. McPherson? So this doesn't go back to council, it goes directly from the committee?
I believe, Your Worship, what you're referring to is the committee of the whole was the steering committee for the liquid waste management plan. The liquid waste management plan is now complete and signed off by the minister. So the committee of the whole's function as steering committee has ended. Okay. We're here in this format to have exactly the kind of dialogue that we got this evening, and so thanks to council for that. This is something that would have to come back to council to be ratified. I think I'm comfortable enough, having worked with you for the last 7.5 years, that we're going to, based on what we've heard from committee, start moving in that direction. In reality, not a lot will happen with the Christmas break, but we'll have the minutes from this committee in front of council in January, and at that point we'll be launching in earnest on the recommendation that we see emerging here.
So does committee need to move this recommendation forward to council then, or is it enough that we've had this discussion?
If the committee could forward this to council, that would be appreciated.
Okay. I'd look to the committee to maybe make that recommendation put before us.
Just to clarify, the recommendation is to refer or recommend to council that they invite the 2 previous bidders to participate in an RFP for a new construction management process that will adjust and optimize the wastewater treatment plant design and constructability plan. Is that the one that we're looking for, Mr. Work or Elise?
I'm just a little confused because Mr. Work put some recommendations in front of us, and then we have a slightly different recommendation in the report. Is that?
Sorry, Acting Mayor Anderson, that is the recommendation by in the report? Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Does that suffice as a recommendation to refer to council? Or
yep.
How best would you like it?
Well, the recommendation is that staff be authorized to retain consultant support to develop.
Am I missing it?
Yeah. It's the one I have anyways. Someone have something different?
I may just be looking in the wrong place.
I may have, excuse me, through the mayor, I may have confused council with the addition of reporting back at the outcome of the evaluation process in my slide, which might have been the source of a bit of confusion. But
Okay, I believe the recommendation at the head of the report would.
Oh. Great, then I'll move that staff be authorized to retain consultant support, develop, issue, and validate a request for proposals for a construction management contract for the Tofino wastewater treatment plant and conveyance system upgrades. I was all the way at the end of the report. My apologies.
Second by Councillor Chalmers. Any further discussion from the committee? Okay, seeing none, I'll call a question. All in favor? That motion is carried.
I was deep into the recommendations. My apologies.
Okay. It's a deep topic. So that, I believe, brings us to the end of our agenda. I'd like to thank our panelists that joined us today to help us through that. If there's nothing else, oh, we do have a question period. Is Elise still with us?
No one has signed up through the mayor. We can adjourn the meeting at any time.
For question period. So at this point then, I guess we could have a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Chalmers, second Councillor Law. All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.